Last thing I want to talk about is threat landscape. So this is the threat landscape is probably not a mega trend really, but I think it's worth kind of mentioning. So you'll all know there's a bunch of stuff that's gone on in the last 5 years that's fundamentally changed the security market really, and the way things people think about security. Not least of which these sophisticated attacks, which I'll talk about in much more in detail in a second. Yeah, we've moved from a world where essentially most attacks on organisations or individuals were kind of digital graffiti youths in their attics just wanting to make a reputation for themselves. We've moved from that now to, you know, an ever-growing black market of assets, you know, credit card numbers, etc., organised businesses, organised syndicates of individuals, things like Stuxnet, so persistent threats that are targeting, you know, big businesses and automation and things like that. That's a very different space to where we were 6 years ago, and it requires really different security solutions, which I'll talk about in a second. So there's a lot going on here. The information explosion thing that I mentioned is, you know, is contributing to the issue. More and more data means more and more risk, etc. So we've defined a security strategy here. So policy and risk-based information and identity-centric, well-managed over a secure infrastructure. That's marketing. What we're really doing here, I want you to understand before we finish here, is to do with this. So here's the world as it's evolved in security. So it used to all be about this stuff, right? It used to be about people like Symantec understanding what the bad stuff looks like. So understanding that there's a virus of this kind or a piece of malware of this kind or a bad file of this kind, detecting it incredibly quickly using that global intelligence network of ours, writing a remedy for it, making sure that remedy gets to you and protecting you against it. That's a traditional security space. Over time, we started to realise actually that we can make our lives a little bit easier in doing all of that by understanding what the good stuff is. So as the internet started to take hold through the 90s, as more and more you know, reputable organisations started to bring internet services to bear, you know, it became obvious to us that, well, if we see something from Adobe, we can probably trust it. If it's really Adobe, it's probably okay. So we can save some of the legwork over here by understanding whitelisting and making sure that these guys are always let through. Here's the issue though, neither of those things are the main issue anymore. The stuff that we're really worried about nowadays sits here. Very, very few actual attacks, but very high profile, very targeted, very persistent, and very scary in some cases. So Stuxnet as an example, we're targeting the automation systems, to be clear, that drive nuclear power plants. That's scary. That's not guys in their attics, you know, doing digital graffiti. That is, by most estimates, at least 200 developers working on code for nearly 2 years to develop a virus. That's scary. And they're only attacking 5 people. They're not attacking tens of thousands of people, 5 people. So it's very difficult because it sits here. This stuff's going to miss it, certainly doesn't belong here, and traditional security solutions are likely to fall short. So I wanted to make you aware of what we're doing in this space. And essentially the technology that we're developing here, and it's already part of Norton, it's now rolling out into our enterprise products, the technology is called Insight. The way I want you to think about Insight is it's a little bit like eBay. So you know on eBay you have a reputation, right? So as a buyer and a seller, over time you gain a reputation, right? Same principle here. What we're doing is we're essentially leveraging the power of the crowd. So if you have a Norton product right now, you'll be asked in a very sort of efficient way often to give feedback on a file or feedback on something you're using, a connection that you've made or something like that. We're collating all of that feedback, and that's becoming a complementary database in our security solutions. So the idea is, over time, the globe will tell Symantec what's good and what's bad, and we can then start to build some definitions around that. So we're still using the blacklisting, whitelisting stuff, but this reputation-based security we think is the way forward because it helps us to target those very targeted attacks that I mentioned. Already, we're blocking around 2 million new threats per month. That's 2 million threats that we wouldn't have seen in that traditional model. Okay, so it's working. Now, we started it, as we always do, with these sorts of things in the consumer space. Consumers see more nasty stuff than anybody else, so it's a good place to start. But you're going to see that technology now rolling out across our enterprise portfolio as well. Here's the Global Intelligence Network. This is, without this, Symantec are nothing, really. You know, this is almost everything we do is in some way reliant on this thing. And you can read the stats for yourselves. You know, we'll give you the slides after the presentation today. We've got over 240,000 sensors, 200 countries. This is an asset that's grown over 20 years and is absolutely unique to Symantec. So even where a competitive vendor might have a new whiz-bang feature that we haven't got, or their product looks a bit cooler, what they don't have is this. They don't have this bedrock of intelligence that we've grown over 20 years. And of course, things like Insight, which I just mentioned, is now becoming, you know, part of this as well. So I wanted to finish really with just quite a simple slide, which rounds everything up really, hopefully in a fairly simple way around Symantec's value. This is why I work at Symantec. This is why I don't work for a hardware vendor. This is why I don't work for a specific application vendor. Because my belief is as people start to develop the next generation of IT, this idea of heterogeneous software being applied to delivery of different types of services, regardless of platform type, regardless of whether it's cloud or virtualization or traditional physical infrastructure or whatever it might be, I think it's going to be absolutely key. I think in the hardware space in particular, this is just, we all know that's going to become commodity and much, much more competitive. People are going to want to swap EMC for Hitachi and then Hitachi for somebody else. They are going to want to do that. And if they tie themselves to the software, frankly, that's provided from these platforms, they're going to be locked in. And every intelligent CIO that I'm speaking to gets that. They get that. They're just looking for a way to get ultimate commoditization and flexibility from hardware whilst being sure they can deliver the applications that are required. That's why I work at Symantec. The breadth of that portfolio that I've shown you and the independence from any of this stuff is absolutely key to what we're trying to do in the market.